Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV of the 80s and 90s and ask the question...
Does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood?
My name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And I legitimately, as soon as I pressed record, I could not remember how we started this show.
It took you a second. I saw that.
Yeah. I'm super excited today because this is our first official fan poll week.
Yeah.
And so as we said, we do a cartoon and then a live action TV and then a movie. But this season, we're switching it up. And at the beginning of every month, we're going to have, or the end, depending on how many weeks there are, we're going to have a poll on Patreon and for the first couple months on our other social media as well. And this one was superhero TV shows of the 70s and 80s.
That's true. We just said, you know what? Let's switch it up for season 2.
Yeah.
And that's what we call supreme confidence.
Okay.
We're like, second season, time to switch the game.
Yeah. Who knows what'll come season 3? We don't even know.
That's right. And we want to thank you first off to everyone who did respond. A number of you responded through Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah, DMs. We got direct
a few DMs,
messages. Yeah.
With option or with which one of your favorites we had listed we should review, and what we came up with was the winner was
The Incredible Hulk. I'm really disappointed because I really wanted Lois and Clark.
It was in there for a little bit, but
I
Incredible
know.
Hulk won out in the end.
Yeah, it was. So it was up between My Secret Identity, Wonder Woman, The Incredible Hulk, Lois and Clark. I think those were the 4. And then people could also, some people too, put in their own suggestions as well.
True.
A couple of people voted for some animated ones, but we really wanted the live action.
Yeah.
So Incredible Hulk won. By a very slim margin. A couple people put it as their second choice, and it was sort of tied with something else, and so that's what we ended up with.
It was the winner.
And for season 2, we really just want to be more interactive, and we didn't expect with season 1 to get as many followers and likes and subscribers as we got. So we were really excited to be more interactive with you guys and kind of reach out there and get to know you better, see what you like.
Yeah.
So...
Before we get to that, though,
yes,
it's my favorite segment, the non-sponsored snack review.
Now, to be fair, this was supposed to be our snack for Clue because it's Airhead's mystery flavor.
It is.
So we were going to do it kind of with Clue, but then we recorded Clue out of town and we left the snack at home.
That's true, yeah.
So we're following up on the promise to do a snack where we have to guess the flavor. And I've never had this before. I have had Airheads before, like for Halloween. But this is like one of your go-to candies, yeah?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like Airheads a lot. I don't know why. I just do.
Well, you like taffy.
I do, and this is like better taffy. Because it's taffy, but it's taffy that doesn't stick too much to your teeth. I guess.
That part's true. What's interesting to me is that I don't like it as much as taffy because I'm not a big fan of sour.
Airheads to me is like taffy and fruit roll-ups got together in a seedy hotel and had a dark, unknown love child.
That is pretty close to what it tastes like. That's a good description.
Yeah, thanks.
If you've never had Airheads, mix taffy with a fruit roll-up, and that's about what you get.
Yeah,
right.
So whoever makes Airheads, if you want me as a spokesperson, I am available.
All right, so Steve, let me ask you this. We're going to play a little game here. So you love Airheads. Let's see how much you know about them.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 countries that formed a candy company together. One company from one country, one company from another company.
Okay.
They merged. They formed a candy company. I would like you to guess. Don't look at the back to try. You can't do cheating and look at the back.
Okay.
That's not fair. I'll tell you the name of the company, and then you tell me what countries you think it is.
Okay.
So it is the Perfetti Van Mel Company.
Okay.
So what 2 countries do you think might be?
Is it France and Italy?
Italy is one of them.
Okay.
Van Mel.
Germany?
Dutch.
Dutch. The
Dutch. Once again, it was the Dutch.
The Dutch.
Anyway.
There's like two kinds of people I can't stand in this world. People who hate other people because of their origins, and the Dutch.
That's what it is. Is that from the other guys?
From Austin Powers.
Oh, from Austin Powers. So it's an Italian-Dutch company, Perfetti Van Mel, and they are known for a few other candies that you might have heard of. You know, they're the 6th biggest candy company in the world.
Really? I've never heard of them.
But because they make
Airheads,
and also Mentos.
Oh,
the
interesting.
fresh maker. They also make Smint, Frutella, Frisk, Chupa Chups, Chloramint, and so a lot of these are Center Fresh. You can tell a lot of these are mint.
Yeah.
So that must be kind of what they specialize at. Happy Dent, again, you can probably a mint candy, I'm guessing, the Happy Dent candy. Vigorsol and Vivident. So, interesting that they do that. Airheads. Now, what year do you think Airheads came out?
Oh boy, I'm gonna say. I mean, I don't remember seeing them.
It's during your lifetime.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing them much in my childhood until I was probably like an adolescent. But I'm gonna go ahead and guess 91.
85.
Okay, I wasn't too far off.
So they
then.
probably became more popularized, I think,
Yeah.
in the 90s. And the reason for that is because now they have 16 different flavors.
Wow.
Cherry, blue raspberry, watermelon, green apple, and white mystery, which is the one we have today.
Right.
So they also have had a lot of special edition ones with superheroes. So it kind of ties in to what we're doing today.
Awesome.
Superman, Spider-Man, promotional type of things. And a flavor in 2007 called Berry Hot, which claimed to heat up your mouth.
Oh, I don't care
I don't
for
care
that.
for that. And then 2008, they went the opposite way and they did chillin' flavors, which were like blue mystery blast bars. And then they also had little bite-sized ones, which is what I think I remember from Halloween.
Well, they also have Airheads Bites, which have like a candy coating, almost like an M&M.
Yeah.
Fruit, or like a Skittle, probably better. But then the Airhead material in the center.
Yeah, and yeah, that's true. And also, here's my favorite fun fact about Airheads. They are made in long strips, like you said, kind of looks like a fruit roll-up. But taffy, they want it to be more malleable and, like you said, less like sticky. They put it through the same manufacturing processes as Play-Doh.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, food production,
Yeah.
but the way that the air gets into it, the thinning and the forming, and even to a certain extent, I guess, the packaging. It's created in big, long strips, very similar to how Play-Doh is created.
That's interesting, because
Play-Doh, then they roll up and put in a
subconsciously,
thing.
I've had to fight myself off from eating Play-Doh.
Yeah.
And so this allows me to, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean,
So-
it's not quite the same consistency, but I think it's interesting that the manufacturing process is very similar to getting air into it and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's sold across Canada and the US and then expanded into the UK in 2015 and also sold in Mexico and Spain.
All right. So I'm going to drop a little knowledge on you, because it's something that I happen to know. We're doing the mystery flavor today. And if you try to figure out what the distinct mystery flavor is, you will fail. Because it's never the same flavor. There's not one flavor that they use for mystery. What they do is when they have, at the end of a run, if they have extra of one flavor,
Oh, okay.
they pull that aside, but it's maybe not enough for an entire batch. They pull it aside, they don't add coloring to it. And then they just make that mystery. So each package's mystery flavor might be an actual different flavor.
Now, what flavor do you think the white was?
This is 100% blue raspberry.
Oh, I thought it was green apple.
It is not. No, it's blue
Yeah,
raspberry.
I wasn't sure. I was kind of in between. I don't eat fruit candy a lot, so I really would rather have a regular
Well,
raspberry.
I'm going to present to you something new.
Okay.
I created it myself just now.
No, I don't like it.
This is the Airhead Cube.
Yeah, that you formed in your hand, and you want me to now eat it?
Well, I'll eat it if you're not going
Well,
to.
you can eat it because
But it's like a dice. It's the size of a dice for everyone that can't see,
Yeah.
which is all of you. And I formed it into a perfect cube as we've had this conversation. And it's quite delightful. It looks, because it's white, because it's a mystery, it actually looks like a sugar cube.
Yeah, except that we've been recording for 10 minutes and 17 seconds.
Yeah.
So you're like, hey, Megan, this thing I've been playing with my hands for 10 minutes. Go ahead and bite into it. No
Yeah.
thanks.
Megan, if you knew the amount of your food that I play with for 10 minutes, it would shock you.
It would shock me. I don't like that one bit. So, I know this is a go-to candy for you. What are we rating out of? Because last time we rated Clue out of Clues because we didn't talk about it ahead of time. And now you're chewing.
I am. We're gonna rate out of Hulk Fists.
Okay. All right. So out of Hulk Fists,
I am gonna give this 5 out of 5 Hulk Fists.
okay, this is a 3 for me. I like regular taffy better. I don't like the sour. I don't like the sour. And then it has like a grainy texture. Like it which is, again, I wonder if it's because the Play-Doh thing, because Play-Doh gets a little grainy too. It's very like, it looks smooth and then you eat it and as you're eating it, it's grainy.
Megan,
it's not like good taffy.
I like taffy, but next to Airheads, regular taffy is just the taste of disappointment.
Listen, I'm just an old-fashioned girl. I just like taffy and maple sugar candies and chocolates.
Okay.
So...
And I like Skittles and Airheads, apparently.
Yeah, I don't like fruit-flavored candy. I'd rather eat a piece of fruit. So...
Four Hulk Fists out of 5. We kind of got that one. I forgot whether we were doing Hulk hands or Hulk fists, but we did it. So 4 out of 5 Hulk Fists.
Yes. That's not too bad.
That's pretty good. Not as high as I'd like it, but
that's
I'm
all
willing
right.
to...
1 out of 5 for the candy, and later on we'll rate the show 1 out of 10. Before we get into our full review and recap, let's talk a little bit about the Hulk. A little bit of lore, a little bit of TV show, some fun facts.
Yeah. So I'll give you the quick summary of the TV show.
Awesome.
Dr. David Banner was trying to figure out a way. He was a widowed doctor, and he was trying to figure out a way to make the human body stronger and better. And so by doing that, he started exploring gamma radiation, and one of his experiments went wrong and turned him into the Hulk. So now whenever he gets angry or hurt, he turns into this 7-foot, 330-pound green behemoth that can break through walls. He's super strong. He never talks. He just grunts and growls a lot. But he's basically this super-powered Hulk. And similar to what people might have seen in the comic books. And so the show is him basically on the run. Everyone thinks that David Banner died. And so he's on the run from an investigative journalist, Jack McGee, who's trying to find the real story behind the Hulk. And he just keeps going around working little jobs. And every town he kind of runs into, he ends up trying to help people in a way he can. Until he turns into the Hulk, and then he has to go to another town again so people don't find out who he is. So it's kind of like when we did The Pretender.
Yeah,
it had that feel to it. Or the show we've been watching recently, Poker Face, where the person's moving from town to town to town and helping people along the way.
Yeah, and also, I don't want to get into it too much because I want to save it for a review, but we did review Manimal, and it reminded me a lot of Manimal.
Okay.
A lot. So, thank you for the overview of the show. I'm going to give some fun facts about the original Hulk, the origin story.
Book.
Yeah, and then you're going to do some fun facts about the show?
Yeah, and I think that's important because there's differences.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting talking about those. So, the Hulk originally was created by Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby was the artist. And it appeared in the debut issue, The Incredible Hulk, in 1962. Originally, I did not know this, Steve, until I did research for today. Did you know that he was supposed to be gray?
Yeah, but it didn't. It didn't actually show up well in the comic book ink, right?
Yeah, and also that it came out kind of greenish.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, though, that Stanley was like, when he transforms, he didn't want him to be a particular race.
Got it.
When he transformed. And I think that's interesting that in 1962 they kind of had that in their mind,
mm-hmm.
right? So Dr. Robert Bruce Banner is the human side of the Hulk. And I guess the original story was that he was accidentally exposed to gamma rays while he was saving the life of someone. There was an experimental bomb, and he put himself in harm's way, which is also different from the movie lore, and I think also the TV show lore. Like, they change it, right? That's one of the changes. We'll get into in a minute. So he transforms into the Hulk when he's emotionally distressed or subjected to some kind of stress against his will. I think that it's interesting, too, that they... when you read the comics, did you read it as being kind of like a metaphor for the Cold War? I mean, maybe not as a real little kid, but like later?
I didn't really, only because, I saw it more of, and it's been expressed this way as well, really the Hulk is supposed to be, it's a representative of the id. Right? It's Bruce Banner, who's this mild-mannered, really kind of skinny, small scientist guy.
Right.
And very intelligent, basically releasing all of the anger and, brute force and monstrosity that's pent up inside him, kind of.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. So what's interesting is that initially it was supposed to be kind of like the alter, like you're saying, kind of an alter ego that had to do with like destructive forces. So you have like the rational side of man, and then like the war, like emotional side. But there were supposed to be kind of some like it's like transforming from like a mindless destructive force like war into like a brilliant warrior or a self-hating protector, like that kind of thing, right? But later on, and I think that I wonder if this had to do with Sybil, because we had like the Three Faces of Eve in the 50s, but Sybil the book came out in the late 60s, early 70s, and then they made a TV movie of it, which we should watch for this, with Sally Field.
Okay.
It's a little bit dark for us to review now that I'm thinking about it on this show. It really is complete lies and garbage. I mean, really. Yeah. And even the poor real woman in real life admitted basically her psychiatrist manipulated her and kind of whatever. Anyway, but Sybil has to do with like multiple personality disorder, what now we would call DID. Dissociative identity disorder. And there's some debate, is that real, is that not? But basically, the lore of this changes so much, but one of the background pieces is that he was abused by his father as a child, and that this alter ego kind of manifested during his childhood, and then it fully was embodied because of the gamma rays.
Gotcha.
But I guess they didn't have that until like around like the 200th or so comic.
Yeah.
Where they actually kind of explain that. And then we have, of course, like other characters that came into being later that we've seen recent productions of, like She-Hulk, and his wife is Betty Ross, which I find funny.
Yeah. And that was very important, and it was actually one of the things that they eliminated from the show, yeah. So it was basically kind of inspired a little bit by like Frankenstein or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like those kind of gothic traditions, those really cool early sci-fi stories. My last thing, and then I'll throw it to you for some stuff about the show, is that the name changed from Bruce to David. Yes.
And there are a couple of things that were floated around that people said, like, well, he has a bunch of aliases, like David Bixby, Bob Danner, Bruce Jones, Bruce Roberts, David Blake, like all of these different aliases.
Yes.
But the real reason they changed it for the show was that the showrunner felt like in the Marvel Universe you have a bunch of alliterative names.
Yes.
Like
Bruce Banner, Peter Parker, yep,
right,
Stephen
like
Strange.
Yeah, and that they don't sound as realistic. So he thought if we change it to David, it'll not be alliterative and it'll sound more like a real person.
Right.
That's basically it. I did say that was the last one, but before you hop into Steve, a lot of people say that this was the first portrayal of the Hulk. It was by a person, but actually there was a Marvel animated like special.
Okay.
With 8-minute shorts of all different characters.
Okay.
And that was the first televised version of the Hulk.
Gotcha.
And then this was the first live action.
Okay.
So
this all started back in 1977. A very good year. It's the year I was born and brought into the world.
well, it's debatable.
It's amazing year. And also the year that Frank Price, the head of Universal Television, offered Kenneth Johnson, who was a producer and a writer, the deal to develop a television show based off the Hulk comics. Mm-hmm. They had licensed some characters from Marvel Comics, and they wanted to make good on that. So originally, Kenneth Johnson turned it down. He wasn't really into it. He wasn't a big fan of comics. But then after reading the Victor Hugo novel Les Miserables,
Les Miserables.
yeah, he changed his mind. He got inspired and decided to work on this project. He made a few changes, as we mentioned already.
It wasn't the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
No,
it was
it was
Les
not.
Mis?
It was Les Mis. So
that's weird.
So he jumped in the project, but like I mentioned before, he did not like comic books. So he started changing things to make it less and less like its, origin story, and less and less about the comic source material. As we said before, as you kind of threw in at the end, he changed the name Bruce to David.
Yeah.
So that it was different from Bruce Banner and didn't have the alliteration.
Yeah.
Also, an executive at CBS said that Bruce was too gayish. And that's a quote.
Yeah, I didn't think that was real, but that actually came out of CBS.
Which I don't get. They didn't say who, but they said there's some...
Probably
that
somebody
was the
named
thought
Bruce.
It was the 70s, it was a little different. And so they wanted it to be a little bit more, I guess they thought David was a little bit more, like,
masculine?
macho, maybe? I don't know.
That's weird.
But they also changed, as we mentioned before, in the comics, his origin is that he's doing atomic testing for the government.
Right.
And he's a physicist. Here they change it to him being a medical researcher.
Yeah.
And it's a much more low-key experiment.
Yeah, and what is hilarious, too, is that in my research it came up that he's supposed to be the 4th smartest man in the world.
Yeah.
But it never says who the other 3 are.
Reed Richards is one of them, Mr. Fantastic.
Oh, okay.
Tony Stark.
Well, I assume Tony Stark.
Yeah, Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and probably Hank Pym.
Stephen Hawking?
No, Hank Pym. This is comic book world.
I know.
Yeah.
But what's hilarious is that they're like, he's the 4th smartest man in the world. He's the 4th smartest person. He's not the smartest. We're not going to put him way up at the top. It's just funny to me.
So they also decided to... Kenneth Johnson was talking to Stan Lee, who was one of the creators of the characters and ran Marvel Comics. And in the comic books, the Hulk does talk, but it's very monosyllabic, right? And so he's more like Hulk crush, Hulk smash, right?
That's what my notes look like for this episode. By the way.
Right. So that's how he talked.
Yeah.
And the producer for the show says, for television, I don't think that'll translate as well. And it would be better and more mysterious if he just doesn't talk at all. And so Stan Lee actually agreed with that. He's like, yeah, you're probably right for like a television medium that would work better.
Well, because you don't need, it doesn't need to be like the original Batman show where they put in like bang, boom, pow, right? I mean, that was like kind of jokey way of doing it, like a camp fun way. So that makes sense.
And so that was really, it actually did make a lot of sense, and I thought it was interesting too because I thought originally in my head, and this is just something I kind of just I guess assumed, was that part of it was because Lou Ferrigno played the Hulk and he's deaf.
Yeah, I thought so
and
too.
So his voice has a definite like tone to it.
It's a little accent.
And it's got an accent to it. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was it, but it's not, because actually the pilot, Lou Ferrigno didn't play the Hulk. He, in the first very pilot episode, he didn't play the Hulk. They made that change afterwards.
Which may be why we couldn't buy that episode,
because
we tried to watch the pilot and we couldn't.
So yeah, so basically, you know, it was one of those things where they wanted the only science fiction element in the whole show to be the Hulk himself. Okay. Right? And so that was kind of a big push of this. Like I said, he wanted this to not really be a comic show. And you know, also they omitted the comic book supporting characters, which are Betsy Ross, as you mentioned before, which is his wife, but also like a co-physicist.
Yeah, I just think that's funny.
Right? Well, also because her dad is Thunderbolt Ross, who's a general for the army, and in the comic books chases the Hulk. The military tries to get their hands on the Hulk to use him as a weapon. Okay. Right, and that's a huge storyline that's been running for many, 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 many years.
Oh, interesting.
You know, he was played by William Hurt in the MCU, Thunderbolt Ross. And then he's passed away now.
So those are the movies where
he played Thunderbolt Ross in the Hulk movie with Edward Norton.
Oh, okay.
And then he played Thunderbolt Ross also in the Avengers movies.
All right. Okay, that's what I was wondering.
And he's passed away, and now apparently he's being replaced by Harrison Ford, who's going to play the character now.
Oh, interesting.
And so, you know, but again, those are major characters in the comic that were completely omitted and replaced just with Jack McGee, who's a reporter who's trying to follow the story.
Yeah, and I don't want to preview too much, but I was expecting this to be much more comic book superhero than it was. I mean, it is like you said, you know, he is like you said with like Poker Face, or I guess not so much Columbo that we watched, but he's going around helping people, right? Like The Fugitive. It's a fugitive setup.
It basically is, yes.
But yeah, I expected there to be a little more sci-fi than there was. So that's kind of interesting.
So, as I mentioned before, you know, there's that change, obviously, where they dropped Bruce and made it David Banner. They did keep Bruce as his middle name. So it's David Bruce Banner. Mm-hmm. The other thing with David was that Kenneth Johnson's son was named David, so he said he used that name as, like, to honor his kid. Which was interesting. As I mentioned before, too, Lou Ferrigno wasn't originally the Hulk. It was an actor named Richard Kiel.
Why did he get kicked out?
Well, what they noticed was that Richard Kiel, and in this, actually, the story goes that Johnson's son actually pointed this out. Kiel was tall, but not very bulky physique-wise. Oh, okay. He wasn't muscular. He was just kind of tall.
Oh, okay.
And so he kind of pointed that out, and everybody was like, that's true. So they went and found Lou Ferrigno, who's a bodybuilder. Yeah. And so they actually reshot some of the pilot.
Oh, all right.
There's some of the scenes in the pilot have Ferrigno, some still have Kiel.
And I don't know how much Bill Bixby, who plays David Banner, I don't know how much he weighs, but I did find that in the original Incredible Hulk comics, Bruce Banner is supposed to be 5'9" and 128 pounds.
Yeah.
Which is like a female supermodel's height and weight. Like, that is very slender for a guy. Like, very slender. So he really should have pretty much no muscle tone, right?
You know, the thing is, too, is that it described, if you look up, like, the write-up for the show...
Yeah.
It describes the Hulk, as I mentioned before, as being 7 foot tall, 330 pounds. It's not that big.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously I know because this was before CGI, you know, CGI and things like that. They had to kind of go with the biggest guy they could find, and kind of, you know, and I don't know if Ferrigno's even 7 feet. I think they're kind of stretching it for that. But 330 pounds is not that heavy either, especially if you're all muscle.
Especially if you're 7 feet tall.
Yeah, in the comics, the Hulk is like 9 feet tall.
Oh, okay.
He's massive. And so it's a little bit different. But again, if you look at the MCU now, they make him more that size, right?
That's
because
true.
they can do it with CGI. So
and then my favorite version is the Professor Hulk. Professor Hulk's my favorite.
There was a number of different versions in the comic. There was the Brute Hulk, which was the original. Mm-hmm. At one point, there was a gray Hulk that came a little later on.
Is there a red one too?
And the gray Hulk, Bruce Banner, would turn into him at night.
Okay.
Okay, and he actually was kind of smart, not like super intelligent, but he was probably average intelligence and really like kind of sarcastic. Mm-hmm. And he actually was a gangster and was running like a gang in Las Vegas. And he was like a mobster almost. And he was gray and not quite as big and as strong as the Green Hulk.
Interesting.
And then as Bruce Banner was trying to continuously experiment on himself to fix the Hulk problem, at one point the two personalities were merged so that he had, as you called, Professor Hulk. He had the body of the Hulk, but the brain and personality of Bruce Banner.
Yeah, which is kind of neat that it's like they finally kind of merge the way a healthy person would.
And it was interesting because you spent all these years and years and years watching the Hulk like in ripped jeans or ripped shorts, like flying around as a savage, and then all of a sudden Bruce Banner takes control mentally, so he's getting like special tailors to make clothes that are like 9 feet tall.
Yeah,
and he's wearing like a doctor's jacket.
Well, that's why I kind of liked in She-Hulk where they had a whole thing about her dress. She had to end up wearing like these horrible dresses because she would Hulk out and then it would be like way too short or it would rip, right? Yeah. And so that she goes to like a special like superhero tailor or whatever, but which was kind of funny.
That kind of mentions the spin-off pieces, as you said. Like She-Hulk is Jennifer Walters, who's his cousin, who was injured in a drive-by shooting in the comics because she was investigating bad guys, and they try to kill her, and he gives her a blood transfusion, which turns her into She-Hulk. And then there's also the Red Hulk, which is Thunderbolt Ross, his father-in-law, who tries to do the experiment on himself to become a Hulk to stop the Hulk.
And that explains...
And that's Red Hulk.
That explains, too, because when we were looking into things, I knew that they thought about making the Hulk red for the TV show because they weren't sure about the green. And I think also the green is really, at that point, would have been really associated with some Star Trek stuff. Mm-hmm. But, and Stanley was like, no, you can't make it red. And that makes sense because if you don't know all the comic book versions and stuff. So, all right, awesome. So we are going to take our break here. And when we come back, we'll talk about our memories or lack thereof. And then we'll get into our full review and recap. Steve, how much was your coffee this morning?
Well, I went to Starbucks, so it was more than I'd like to say.
Every day, countless podcasters like us are left alone, without anyone to care for them. We suffer in silence, waiting for someone to come to our rescue.
But you can make a difference. You can be our hero.
By supporting our podcast on Patreon, you can help us give a voice to the voiceless. You get access to exclusive content like bonus episodes and subscriber polls every month.
All this for less than the price of a cup of coffee.
Together, we can make a world where every podcaster is loved and cared for.
So please, consider supporting our podcast on Patreon today.
Just visit patreon.com/stopruiningmychildhood. And thank you for your support. Welcome back, everyone. My name's Megan.
And I'm still Steve.
And I could be wrong, but I think this might be the first episode with our new Patreon ad.
It's possible. We'll see what they think.
We worked real hard on it.
So, Let's start with you, Megan. Do you have memories of the Incredible Hulk?
I mean, not really. What's interesting to me about this is that I really was expecting something totally different. It was one of these shows that like my parents might watch that was like on in the background sometimes. Okay. And it was certainly on in reruns like a lot of times before whatever I wanted to watch. Now, everybody knows, even way before the movies, I knew like the general thing of like, it's like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the Hulk smashes stuff. It's a guy who turns into it, right? But yeah, I don't think I've ever actually watched a full episode. So I don't have many, I don't have many memories of this.
Okay.
No.
I have a lot of memories.
I do have a super big crush on Mark Ruffalo.
Well, yeah, he's the new Hulk.
Yeah.
So I guess that's all right.
And Professor Hulk is chef's kiss.
That's interesting. We're going to have to unpack that with a therapist at some point.
No, that's all right.
I have a lot of memories of this. It came out in 1977, like I said, the year I was born, and it went on until, I believe, 1982? Mm-hmm. 1983, the early 1980s.
Yeah.
And so, because there was over 80 episodes of this that was done, as well as some TV movies that were done in the 1980s. And so I probably saw it on repeat, like on, on
like
reruns.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing it a lot growing up. And I really, I've always been a superhero fan, and I've always been a comic book fan since I was young. So I really loved this. I watched this. I remember watching Linda Carter's Wonder Woman. Later on, Lois and Clark, but that was much later. Christopher Reeve as Superman in the 80s movies.
Yeah.
I was always a big superhero fan. And The Incredible Hulk, it's funny because we watch it now as adults, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's different now when you're looking at it 40 years later, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, it was pretty awesome. Like, the special effects in it at the time were, like, top-notch, right? And so you see this guy who's turning into this green monster, and that was always the best part of the show, right?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, it's great, he's helping people, whatever, like, Hulk out and, like, wreck stuff. That's what a kid wants to see, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But I remember looking at it, and I remember even as a kid, though, being a little sad by it. Like, every episode ends with him, like, hitchhiking to another town, and there's, like, sad music in the background. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's sad. Like, he's just a sad wanderer. Yeah, who just wants to be back to himself.
He doesn't have a good wife or family.
Yeah.
Or friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Betsy Ross was waiting for him, or Betty Ross.
Betty Ross, yep.
Did you guys play Hulk?
I didn't really play much as a kid, I guess when I'd be a little older, but by that time it was different. Right,
because your brothers really wouldn't, by the time your brothers would have been old enough to watch this, it really wouldn't have been on, right?
Yeah.
I think if it had been, my brother and I might have played Hulk a bit. Okay. I think we were both too young, like, in terms of when it came out and stuff, and certainly by the time he was older, like, old enough to like something like that, it wouldn't really have been on at all.
That's true, yeah.
But I think that's why the Hulk fists came out as a toy, right?
Yeah, and that came out, like, more towards when the
Marvel stuff. But I'm just saying, like, that's the kind of stuff kids like.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's one of the things that surprised me about this show. So let's get into it, because I didn't feel like it really was a kids show.
Yeah, so the first episode that we watched was from season 2, and it's an episode called Alice in Disco Land.
Yeah, this was my choice, and I regretted it. But in some ways I didn't. So we open up, it's set up exactly like Saturday Night Fever. If you haven't seen that movie, I would almost guarantee that they reused the floor set from that, at least, because it has a very distinct look with, like, white tiles
that light up.
White square tiles that light up different colors, and it's a disco floor, and there is... Okay, here's the first thing I'm going to say about this show. You know that I have an issue with this. It's like you with Slow Candy. I don't like slow, long edits. Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating to me, Steve, is that this show came out about the same time as Columbo that we did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Columbo had a few times where it lingered here and there, but that show really moved along. I enjoyed it. This had long shots. Like, it really could have been a half hour.
Do you think that was a late 70s thing?
Yeah, I do think so. And also an early TV thing, because they didn't have as many cuts. Like, if you watch a show now, it'll cut to multiple storylines as well, and you just don't have that in the 70s.
No, it was following one storyline.
Yeah, you really don't have it through the 80s until you get things like VHS and people, like, really reruns more often where they're showing, on basic cable and stuff like that. But he's like the fourth smartest man in the world, and he's bussing tables.
Well, yeah, because if he were to take a job as a doctor, people would know who he was, right?
But I didn't know the premise of this show, so I just came into it.
You didn't know he was supposed to be such a genius?
I didn't know. I knew that he was a genius. I did not know that he was on the lam. I didn't know that he was...
Oh, okay.
I didn't know it was town to town to town to town. And so I was like, why is he bussing tables? But they really are filming this like a 1970s acid trip kind of movie.
It opens, as you said, with that disco environment, but with a very elaborate disco dance segment.
Yes.
Going on as it opens.
A really long one.
Yes.
Is my point. And they're using like a fisheye camera lens at different points to like make it trippy, basically. So then they pull out, he's bussing tables, and there's this girl at a table, and she looks like she's like in her early 20s. And she's like, all right, let's toast to the stupidest tea party I've ever been at.
Yeah.
And then they have a flashback. And
with hazy border. Yeah.
It's like that. They have a flashback to him under a tree reading Alice in Wonderland to a little girl.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, I have to tell you, as somebody who has never seen this show, I was like, does this girl remind him of his daughter? What a weird toast. Why the flashback? Is he having some kind of an acid trip at this point? Like, I was, like, really confused.
Yeah, the flashback continues, though, and so it explains that David recognizes her as his goddaughter.
Yes.
Who he hasn't seen in many years because he's been thought to be dead.
But here's the thing. We find out later that she's supposed to be 16. Now, in real life, the girl playing her is 20, which is why the confusion. But they do that with teenagers all the time, right? But the thing is that she's 16. When he was reading her this book, she was probably 9.
Yeah.
He does not look any different.
No, and she doesn't recognize him at all.
And she doesn't recognize him.
Or the fact that he still uses David as his first name.
Yeah, he
just changes the last name.
Yeah.
I wrote down David recognizes one of the dancers as his goddaughter, Alice, who now looks sort of like a disco Mary Lou Retton.
Yeah, a little bit. But very much so, like, they had this look at this point in the 70s where, like, the fashionable thing was to have, like, really, like, no chest, no butt. Like, really, like, a very slim figure. And that's kind of what she's got going on.
Kind of like a gymnast figure, almost.
Yeah, a little bit.
Or an ice skater, kind of. That's what I was...
Yeah, I think it had a little bit to do also with the, like, heroin.
Well,
and also androgyny, because a lot of the men would dress in like jumpsuits as well, like rocker, like glam rock and all that kind of thing. So meanwhile, a waitress wants David to hit on her.
Yeah,
and she keeps flirting with him, and she looks like a lot like Bette Midler from The Rose, when Bette Midler did that movie where she was kind of like Janis Joplin.
like a really young Bette Midler. Yeah.
Yeah. I think she's styled to look like Bette Midler.
Okay.
Like, very specifically. Then we have another flashback. And it's stuff about Canada. And he says, Roz, you're running away. Which is, like, this girl's mom.
Yeah.
That she's just been running from place to place to place. And then more slow shots of dancing.
Yes. We have David reaches out to an alcohol program to try to help Alice, who he thinks is an alcoholic.
Yeah, because she's there every night dancing and drinking it up.
And drinking a lot. And apparently this place serves minors.
And she keeps asking him for shots.
Yeah, this place serves alcohol basically to everyone, no matter what age they are.
And this is interesting to me because a lot of times the Marvel stuff now is all about, like, vigilante as, like, we have to be out. Well, that's what the whole Civil War was about, right? Not the real Civil War.
Right,
But the
Marvel Civil War, yeah.
That, do we work within the system or do we work outside the system?
Right.
So it's interesting that he works within the system to go, and this woman very clearly says, well, you can't force her to get help. And he's like, well, she's a minor. And she's like, yeah, alcoholism is really kind of growing among teenage kids. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to do things, but, you know, unless you have their parent support where you could maybe pay for them to go into a program. It's interesting because AA was founded in the 50s, but really didn't grow until about a decade later, right? So then you have in the 70s the formation of stuff like Al-Anon, Alateen, all of that. And you also have around this time too, like problem novels. And we watched after school specials.
After school specials,
right?
yeah.
So this felt a little like an after school special because we're learning something about alcoholism. But I also think that it is hilarious that she's supposed to be 16 because up until this point I had no idea.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, that lady gives him a little bit of information, but then basically says, well, the only thing you could do is report the bar for serving minors.
Right, and that's basically what he does. And then we have a scene without Bill Bixby where we find out behind the scenes that this bar is financially in trouble, and that's why they've been serving minors. They owe money. Now they're going to be in trouble with the alcohol board. They're going to have to try to pay that guy off. They're already going broke, and now they're going to lose more money.
Right.
Then we have Alice fighting with her boyfriend who grabs this other girl, Molly, and Alice is like, she's tall and blonde. I can't compete with that.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah, and also...
You're beautiful, Alice. Stop.
Well, the issue is that because David reported them, they have to put a pause on serving minors.
Yes.
So they won't serve her, and she doesn't feel like dancing because she's not drunk, and she's going through withdrawals.
Yeah.
Which are really overemphasized.
Listen, you guys, she has the DTs, and the way that they film this is so close to, like, an alcoholic version of Reefer Madness. I legitimately was laughing through this entire thing, and not in a good way.
The DTs are one thing, but she's, like, hallucinating, and she's sober.
Yeah. It really is more like she's been doing acid or PCP.
Yeah, she's got deep purple bags under her eyes. She's only not had a drink in 24 hours.
Yeah, it's only been a day. And she goes, my daddy will know what to do. Well, your daddy's dead.
Yeah.
So she goes up to this billboard, and here we have the longest scene in the show. This goes on forever. I put forever in my notes with like 9 E's, okay? It is forever because David realizes it. He tries to go up and get her. She's pulled up the safety ladder. He's got to climb the real stairs. He trips and falls, and then he becomes Hulk. Hulk angry. Hulk save girl. Yeah. Hulk smash. Like, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, he turns into the Hulk and he saves her from the billboard.
But the journalist finds out.
The journalist finds out. So this is the part of the episode, like every episode, where Jack McGee starts showing up in town and sniffing around.
I don't like that.
But it also is a harrowing enough experience for Alice that she lets David bring her to an AA meeting the next day.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, again, where we have almost like an educational part of the show.
Yeah, and we also, before that, so there's this thing where her boyfriend doesn't understand why she's acting like this, right? And he brings her the reporter, and the reporter says their paper would give $10,000 if it leads to, like, basically the capture of this Hulk that he's had PTSD from.
Yeah, this is like the carrot that this Jack McGee slings around all the time. He's constantly telling people you could get $10,000 if your information leads to the Hulk, and he never pays anybody.
No, and $10,000 in 70s money is like $50,000.
It's a ton.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. So her boyfriend Louis needs to win this dance contest. But she kind of wants to maybe stay sober, right? And he's now like, well, maybe you could have a drink to loosen up. So we go to the Alateen or AA meeting.
It's an AA meeting
for teenagers.
Yeah. Yep, and and it's led by a 46-year-old, 26-year-old group leader.
Okay, listen. In real life, this person is about, I think, 47, right? The best line of this whole thing is they say, Alice, why do you drink? And Alice goes, I'm not an alcoholic, I just like it. And they all laugh at her, and they're like, that's bull! That's bull! That's nonsense!
Yeah.
You're a liar!
Yeah.
And she
Sling your hash somewhere else.
Yeah, that's what they say, which made Steve laugh. And then, you guys, I totally lost it. We had to pause this show for like 5 minutes because the group leader says, Alice, let's just pause for a second to talk about me. How old do you think I am? And Alice goes, I don't know, 35, 37?
That would have been a really nice conservative guess for what this lady looked like.
This lady goes, full on, looks her in the face and goes, I'm 26 years old.
Yeah. Like, alcohol has done this to me. And, Megan, it's not just you and I who start laughing. They flash it to David, to Bill Bixby, and he almost breaks. He goes like this. Like, his eyes wide, like, are you kidding me?
Because
she looks older than he is.
He looks older than him. And she goes, I started drinking when I was 11 years old. And this is what alcohol and cigarettes have done to me. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't. Now, I will say this. People who smoke heavily and drink heavily, they can prematurely age. They sometimes can get leathery skin. They can sometimes get like the redness around like the nose and cheeks. What I like to call the Ted Kennedy look. But, sorry, Ted Kennedy.
Wow.
but they don't. But the 26-year-old is not going to look like a 50-year-old.
No, not at all. It was really. I mean, if she, like I said, she's like, how old do you think I am? And Alice is like 30, 35, and I'm like 45, 50.
Yeah.
And Bill Bixby must have been thinking the same thing with his reaction when she said 26.
26.
Actually, I think she said I'll be 26 next week.
Yes, that's
I'm
what
like,
she
what?
did. She didn't say I'm 26. She said next week I'll be turning 26.
I'm like, in dog years? I don't know how this is done.
It's hilarious. So that's the thing, right? That not unlike some of the problem novels from like the 70s, 80s, and some of the early YA lit, like they're always over the top. They're like really trying to get you to not drink. They don't want you to think that this whole jazz disco life is cool.
Yeah.
It just leads you to jump off a billboard because you think you see your dead dad telling you to. Like it makes a 26-year-old look 50.
So she finally kind of buys in a little bit. And she's like, okay. And she goes home and her boyfriend, again, like shows up and tries. He wants, that night is supposed to be the dance competition.
Yeah.
And they're kind of a shoe-in to win.
I don't like this guy.
But he's like, I need you to come. And she's like, legitimately, this is a good thing, right? She's like, I don't want to go to the club because I'm trying to stay sober and it's going to be too difficult for me to not drink.
And they talked about that at the meeting too before the 26-year-old nonsense. That one guy was saying he got rid of his old friends. He's trying to find new friends because he realized they weren't really his friends. They were just his drinking buddies. He doesn't want to live like that anymore, right? All that kind of thing. So then David comes around and he talks to her.
Yeah.
But he does something at the end of their chat that I found rather odd.
Okay.
He leaves the bottle of alcohol there.
Yeah, her boyfriend brought like a celebratory bottle of liquor.
Yeah.
And she,
because he's a good guy.
Right. And then he really didn't care about her struggling alcoholism. He just wanted her to show up and dance with him.
Yeah, because he needs the money.
David shows up right after that in this like bottle of liquor with a ribbon on it is still sitting on the table in between them.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, peace out. He's like, you got to do what's best for you.
Listen, you have to decide.
The only thing I will say about that, that was probably a bad call on David's, right?
Yeah.
But his point of the conversation was, you're right, I I can't do this for you. You have to be ready and you have to make the decision. So it was almost like a test. Like, if she's really ready, then she's going to choose not to drink that. But if she's not, like, he can't police her every minute of the week.
Yeah, but also you don't leave a bottle of alcohol in front of somebody who's been to one AA meeting.
Well, she's turned a corner.
She's riding the pink cloud, as they say, and she'll be right back on that bottle. So anyway, we cut back to the club.
Yeah, and we get, before David shows back up to the club and Alice, we get a little shot with the club owner who wants to get rid of David because he's figured out that David is the one who ratted him out. He's the snitch.
Yeah, he's the snitch. So they're like, you talk to the grand jury, and they put him in cuffs, and he doesn't change right when he's in cuffs.
No.
Right? But then they kind of rough him up a bit.
They rough him up a bit, and they leave him inside a cage.
Yeah.
And they say, we'll just go and rough up Alice a little bit.
And that's...
While she's upstairs dancing because Alice shows up.
Yeah.
And it's funny because before they grab David, Alice shows up, and the waitress comes over to David and said, that girl over there brought you a gift. And she holds out the tray, and it has the bottle that Alice didn't open.
Yeah.
And she made the right choice.
Well, yeah, but then she went to the club with her
because she's like, heck with
boyfriend.
it. I can do this. So they are dancing to win the competition.
Yep.
And David gets left locked in a cage. That freaks him out. So he starts throwing himself against the cage. Mm-hmm. And that's when he gets hurt and turns into the Incredible Hulk.
And then my notes just say, Hulk smash! Because that's basically what happens. He just starts smashing random
he
stuff.
comes upstairs and just smashes up the whole place, but he saves the day.
Yeah. And then we have a little tag at the end where Alice is going to testify before the grand jury about what the club owners have been doing, serving all these underage kids.
Yeah.
Because that's something that you have a grand jury for, except you don't.
Right.
And then, But she also implies that she stayed with the jerk Louis.
Well, she loved him.
So what? He gave her a bottle of alcohol and he treated her horribly.
I know, Megan, but...
Alice, you're going to be right back on the sauce if you don't get out of that. She
obviously has some issues with the loss of her dad. Well, I would also say, though, is the thing that caught my eye about the Hulk at the end of this is... the Hulk comes up and just beats up bad guys, right? He takes care of the bad guys. But I don't know if it was a violence on TV issue or just the way that everything is filmed. The Hulk actually doesn't really beat people up very well. He doesn't hit or smash or kick people. He just grabs guys by the scruff of their neck and the back of their waist and throws them across the room.
Well, listen, Lou Ferrigno one time, for real, flipped over a car for part of the show.
Oh, I'm not doubting his strength.
They were gonna kind of do stuff, and he was like, "Nah, I can do it."
I'm just doubting the fight choreography.
Well, I'm saying
he just basically throws people around.
But having seen Lou Ferrigno and other stuff, I think he is like a gentle giant kind of guy. Like, he seems like he would do that. You know? Just like, hey, I don't want to hurt you too bad.
Right.
But I am going to throw you into this soft mattress pile over
I am going to throw you through a wall, just so you're aware. Wall.
All right, so that was our first episode.
So then we led into the second episode, which was my choice.
All right.
From season 4, Wax Museum.
Yes. My favorite part of this episode comes right at the beginning, where David has gotten a job at a wax museum. And the guy running it comes up to him and is kind of like, I have a problem. I need to talk to you. And David goes, oh, is it about the job? I know I'm not that experienced in wax. Stop. I don't know why that tickled me so much. Why would anybody be experienced in wax? How many wax museums are there that somebody would be coming from one wax museum with a lot of experience in wax to come and work at this second, smaller wax museum that's not up and running yet? It's hilarious to me. So we find out anyway that this woman got out of a mental hospital recently. Yeah,
the lead wax artist, the lead sculptor.
Yeah.
Her dad died recently, and she is not mentally healthy. And we see one of the first scenes with her in it is her thinking that the sculptures that she's made are come to life.
Yeah. And they do look very lifelike. They're like Madame Tussauds.
Yes, yeah, and she's very good at sculptor.
I also have to say that I could not tell whether they used real people who just like stood still or if they were actually wax figures. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well,
Either
for a few of them, I think they
great.
did use people because they came to life, obviously.
But some of them I couldn't tell if they just really put a lot of makeup on, you know what I'm saying? So at any rate...
So we find out that Lee, which is this woman's name, her dad started the museum, and he was also a sculptor, and he died in a fire recently that almost closed the museum.
And she basically felt she couldn't save him. So she saw what happened and couldn't get to him in time, couldn't save him. We also find out that the bank is trying to take the title of the museum, and they've given her uncle, who's now running it, a number of chances
to get the money to pay off, like, the money that the
or
museum owes.
he could basically sell it to them and just get money from them, right? Because he's given them, like, a portion, basically.
Yes.
What it comes down to. This is my second favorite part, that they're having this conversation with the bank people. And the uncle says, well, Lee is very creative, and she has a whole plan for the reopening of the museum. Show them your drawings. Then she pulls out her portfolio, and page after page, it's just black smudges. It looks like Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know. And he goes, he tries to cover for her, kind of, and he's like, it looks like maybe you brought the wrong portfolio.
Yeah, he's like, it must be my fault. I must have grabbed the wrong one and we were in a rush. But it becomes quite obvious soon, at least to me. I wrote down, like, right after the bank, I wrote down, the uncle's gaslighting Lee to think she's crazy.
This I put, too. I was like,
it became pretty obvious that the uncle was trying to make her think she's crazier than she is.
And a lot of the TV shows of this time period would do this, where it's kind of like how Law and Order will rip things from the headlines. A lot of TV shows will take other shows or movies and kind of do, like, their adaptation. So the first one we watched was kind of like their adaptation of Saturday Night Fever, right? Or their inspiration was that. And here, very clearly, we use the term gaslighting. It comes from this movie, which was first a play, where this woman is kind of being mentally tortured by her husband because she has an inheritance, and he's trying to make her think she's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? And also, Angela Lansbury plays the femme fatale in that. She's like the mistress who's also gaslighting this girl. And she's like the maid. So, before Murder, She Wrote. But at any rate, yeah, gaslighting is definitely what's going on here. So it's a little bit Gaslight, and it's a little bit that Vincent Price movie with the wax.
House of Wax.
Yeah. So Lee is showing David her various different sculptures.
Yeah.
And she is really amazing, right? And then the uncle tells her to leave, and then he goes, I haven't seen this tableau yet. Uncover it. And it's Lee in wax, looking like she's being tortured.
She's like on a rack almost.
Yeah, and her dad the face of her dad is used for another figure doing the torturing.
And for another one also doing that. It's like two people torturing her.
Yeah, one is like a monk. Dad. One is like a monk's pointing at her, and the other one is doing the actual torturing. And it's like, oh, dun, 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 dun.
Also, David, this is now the 4th season of The Incredible Hulk. Yeah. So David's been on the lam for 4 years.
Yeah.
He's got an eye for when something seems fishy, Megan.
Yeah.
And he thinks something's up. So he pockets one of Lee's pills. Mm-hmm. Because she says that she takes these pills to stop, like, hallucinations.
Yeah.
And he's like, again, remember now, this is actually one of the benefits to the change in the storyline. Because not being a physicist, now being a medical doctor, David realizes there's no pharmacy stamps or numbers or marks on these pills. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of is a red flag to him. So he pockets one and brings it to a free drug, like, identification place.
Well, it's set up to look like the DMV. I don't know if they had places like this in the 70s.
I don't either, because I was barely alive.
It's set up to look like the DMV, and there's a sign behind the guy that says, no questions, no judgments. And I think that I think you could turn drugs into them. So I think if you were like, hey, I found this heroin or I found this cocaine, but it seems like you could also have it tested for purity. Like, hey, has this been cut with baby formula or is this cocaine pure?
Or
I don't
if
know.
if somebody gave you pills and you didn't know what they were, or
you could find
out, right?
Yeah, for safety. It's very interesting. And this guy is like, he goes, he says, my favorite line of the episode besides the first line about not being experienced in wax.
Yeah.
Where he says, hey, man, you hear the rap I just gave that chick? And David's like, yeah. And he goes, good. I have to repeat that like 300 times a day. And he just takes the pill.
It was basically just about how, here, you have a card with a number on it. And you can call and give us that number, and we'll tell you about the pill tomorrow.
But it's supposed to be, again, like learning, like, hey, if you have this problem, you could take it to a place like this.
Yeah.
And they're cool. They won't ask you questions. You hear the rap they gave it.
It's interesting, because the first episode we watched, I was like, remember we talked about how it had kind of that almost after-school special and education piece, and I was like, I wonder if that's this episode. But this one felt the same way about the drugs she was taking and mental illness a little bit.
What I think it is, I don't know if all the episodes are like this, and we did have to pay for them. We don't have a lot of Patreon subscribers yet, so
if you'd like us to do more of the Incredible Hulk, jump on the Patreon.
But one of the things that I noticed is that he's helping people, but it does have to do with mental health. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's because he's in the state that he's in, that then he kind of has more compassion for other people when they're struggling with their mental health. But it reminded me a little bit, oddly, of Star Trek Voyager, that a lot of, that's the one where they get lost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Star Trek Voyager, where they get lost, a lot of their episodes have to do with, like, the things that people go through when they're confined in a small space. Like, there's a lot of, so I'm guessing that they probably kind of had that as a theme, maybe not in every episode, but in a lot of them.
Well, even the first one, in the disco one, even Alice, when she's like arguing with him about alcoholism, she says, like, ironically, like, you don't know what it's like to have something in you can't control. Right? And of course David does, because it's the Hulk, right? He literally has something inside him.
Yeah. And so they did that, like, sorry.
No, that's all right.
I can cut it. All I was gonna say, I'll cut this whole thing. But what I was gonna say is, like, on Voyager, they'd have a lot of stuff about, like, dreaming and, like, feeling unreal when you're in, like, a place you can't control and like that. Like, much different from regular. Anyway, so
David
Hulk smash.
David comes back.
Yeah,
and Lee is trying to. She's working with wax, and so she's got one of the big vats of wax that's being heated by a burner, and it has a spigot on it that she opens up, and basically you can get liquid wax out to pour into a mold.
Yes.
And she opens it up, and she's filling this mold, and it won't shut.
Yeah.
And so liquid wax starts pouring, hot
sleeping.
Liquid wax. Yeah.
In a cot.
Down, yeah, because it was part
in
of
like a cupboard, right?
Because the beginning they mentioned that the job doesn't pay much, but it's room and board. Like, he could stay there.
He could stay in the janitor's closet. So she starts screaming, and he realizes that he runs, and then he slips on the wax.
Yeah, he slips on the wax, of course, and he's trying to close it too, and it won't. Then he slips again, and the hot wax spills on him and burns him.
This is my favorite,
which turns him into the Hulk.
This is my favorite hulking out of all time. This includes the Marvel movies. This includes the Ed Norton movie. This includes everything. Because what he does is he hulks out, okay? But before he smashes stuff, he looks at the wax figures confused and then smacks one at the back of the head, and then the head falls off. And then he goes, ah! And then he gets angry and starts smashing things. It's hilarious. And I don't know if they meant it to be funny.
Yeah.
But it is really funny. So he smashes he just picks up the whole thing of wax and throws it.
Yeah.
Then he smashes through a wall like the Kool-Aid Man.
Then he runs down the street and robs an ATM.
No, well, first he scares the newspaper seller.
Yes.
because we learned about the evening edition last week. Then there's a very wealthy woman at an ATM. And this is very obviously one of the first ATMs. The buttons are enormous.
The buttons look like a fake TV computer from like the 1960s.
Yeah. And she goes to put in her code and then sees him and goes, oh, and runs away. And then he looks at the buttons and he starts pushing them. And the ATM keeps talking and music is playing. And then he just smashes the heck out of the ATM and money flies out. What?
And he runs away because the Hulk wants nothing to do with money. He has no idea.
Yeah. So the next day, we find out that the threads were stripped.
Yeah, but the old uncle uses this as an excuse to close the museum, and basically, he's like, "This we can't recover from this," and basically blames it on Lee.
And in the meantime, the cool cat down at the clinic calls him back and says, "Yeah, man, this pill is just sugar and LSD, and I don't know who's been giving it to you, but I'd be real careful before I take another one."
Yeah.
Unless you want a real bad trip. And then he mentions, and I think that this is interesting, he mentions some of the people that were like tested on with LSD who didn't
the government
who didn't fully know what was going on. And he's kind of like implying that you could have a bad trip and not be able to come back from it.
Right.
And this girl's been dosing now we'd call it microdosing. But This girl's been dosed with LSD like 2-3 times a day.
Yes.
And she takes these pills when she gets nervous.
Causing the hallucinations, not stopping
Exactly.
them.
She pops them whenever she gets nervous, right? And her uncle always says, "Have you taken your pill?" It's very interesting. So
in the meantime, McGee shows up looking for David.
Yeah.
Because he heard from the newspaper guy that a green giant ran past.
Yeah, and also, Lee's been working on 2 different statues. One of the Hulk, right? Mm-hmm. And then one of David that obviously looks exactly like him.
Right.
And he's like, "Oh, that's startling." And then he goes, and she's like, "Oh, you don't like it?" And he's like, No. Let me use this opportunity to play out one of my greatest fantasies." And then they cut, and then they showed like later that day, and it's dressed up like a pirate.
Yeah,
so it's got a beard and a patch.
And an eye patch because he obviously doesn't want to be recognized.
I just thought that was a funny touch too. This one was a lot later than the first episode.
It was. McGee, as I said, shows up and he's questioning somebody at the newspaper stand, not the guy that tipped him off.
Right.
And what do you think the first thing McGee says is?
What is that, Steve?
You can get $10,000 for information into the Hulk. Nobody ever gets paid this money.
This guy's never going to pay anybody anything. So basically, the confrontation happens.
Yes.
And the uncle admits to murdering the dad. Yeah. Lee has basically like a flashback.
Yep.
And she's like, "You did it. I remember now. You did this and you did this." And there's a fire, and then Hulk smash through fire. Hulk save Lee. Hulk smash Uncle. And
Hulk, you missed out one part. McGee shows up to question them.
You're right.
So the uncle locks David, McGee, and Lee all in the burning room. Yeah. And David turns into the Hulk and saves both Lee and McGee, the guy that's been tracking him for 4 years.
Well, also because we're in season 4.
Right. So he saves both of them.
Yeah.
And then runs off, basically. Hulk saved the day.
Hulk saved the day, but my favorite part is that in the fight with the uncle tries to hit him with a cudgel, which if you don't know, that's the thing. Okay. If you don't know, that's the thing with the stick with the chain and then the ball.
Yeah.
With spikes on it.
Yep.
And the Hulk takes the cudgel and smushes it.
Yeah.
Like it's a Nerf ball.
Yeah.
But you're also like, I don't know if that was a wax cudgel or a real cudgel. And then we cut, again, we have the happy ending piece, right?
Yes.
Hulk has saved the day. They're opening the museum. and it'll be a real success. I'm sure a lot of people go there, even though there was a murder and 3 attempted murders. And that's basically it. So, Steve, did they talk about reception?
Yeah,
how
a little
did people
bit.
feel about this?
The
at
Incredible
time?
Hulk was actually a major rating success.
Really?
Yeah, in its day. It even became a hit in Europe.
Huh.
Despite the fact that other superheroes really were less popular at that time period. Right?
They had a planned, finale that they never did. And I guess it's good because they ended up doing the movies. But originally, I guess they were going to have, kind of a happy ending for him where he no longer would have the Hulk.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, in 1977 to 78, during the first season, it was rated at number 26.
Okay.
Which was tied with Hawaii Five-0.
Oh, okay.
In the second season, it dropped to 44, but was still tied with Hawaii Five-0 and Dear Detective.
Oh, what the heck is that? Wait, I heard it in
That was another show, Dear Detective.
But in my head, I didn't hear DEAR. I heard DEER.
You thought it was a deer with antlers who was a detective?
Well, what I saw in my head when you said that was basically BoJack Horseman with antlers and a deerstalker hat, and I just got this Dear Detective and then I thought, wait, is it a detective who also hunts? And then I realized that it was DEAR.
Yes.
And I had all of those thoughts in the 3 seconds in which you repeated that.
So it never dropped below 49th.
That's
And 26 was its highest. But that's actually pretty good given all the shows that were on at the time. Right? So it was considered a pretty good hit. On Rotten Tomatoes, looking back now, the 2-hour pilot scored 57%.
Okay.
The first season has a rating of 75%, though. So the pilot wasn't received as great, but the actual season itself of the first season at least has a 75% rating. So most people did like it. Somebody that was writing for the Tallahassee Democrat,
okay,
which was a newspaper,
a very popular paper at the time,
noted that Lou Ferrigno did the strong silent type like nobody's business.
Okay.
And was a natural for the role of the Hulk.
All right.
And so it was received fairly well, I guess, in its time period. So with that being said, how did we receive it? What were your thoughts on the Incredible Hulk?
It would have been good as a half-hour show.
Okay, you felt it was too slow.
Yeah, because also you have to know too. So nowadays when we have shows that are an hour, not only do they move faster, but we typically, if you're on network TV, not Netflix and all that, because that's structured differently, but network TV shows also have more ads, and so you're talking really about maybe 42 to 45 minutes. This was 48 minutes long. And it was, for Megan, about 18 minutes longer than it needed to be. And it wasn't storyline stuff. It was all long cuts.
Yeah.
Now, I did enjoy the second one more than the first one. The first one just dragged to no end. I mean, it really bothered me. How did you what were your feelings? Before I give my number, what were your kind of feelings about it?
There were things that I agree with. I was a fan of the Hulk growing up, but I will say, looking back now, and the purpose of our podcast, right, is did it hold up? Mm-hmm. I don't think it holds up great, right?
No.
It is slow-paced, and, I put special effects in quotes because it's really just makeup, right? And it's some lighting. The special effects are not great looking back on it. And so it's kind of it's something you'd almost kind of joke about now. Although, this is what I thought.
Because I didn't do my positives, but go ahead and then
I'll roll into the positives.
Yeah.
What I thought was this, okay? As you know, because we've talked about this outside the podcast, myself and many other Marvel fans were we were kind of disappointed by She-Hulk that was just on Marvel.
Yeah.
Or on Disney Plus, right? I would as I was watching this, I said, you know what? I would much rather have seen a Disney Plus series with Mark Ruffalo
big time.
Wandering around on the lam like this, because this was comic accurate. The Hulk, for most of his history, was on the run, right? Mark Ruffalo stumbling into different situations with today's CGI and better storytelling, and I would be interested in that show.
And also because, given now the history of the Marvel Universe stuff, that him trying to be low-key after really people knowing who the Hulk is, and then somebody following him or people following him through social media, that kind of thing. Here are some of my positives. I do think that Bill Bixby was great in it. I do think that for what he did, Lou Ferrigno did a good job.
Right.
I do think that it is good that they were trying to, in the way that they understood mental health 40 years ago, it is good that they were trying to talk about mental health and kind of destigmatize it, because really doing things like going to AA, getting therapy, taking medicine for mental health issues.
Yes.
These are all things that still are kind of stigmatized sometimes, right? So I did like those aspects of it, but yeah, the storytelling wasn't even bad. It really was a lot of just about editing. And it doesn't, and because of those differences in how we see mental health, because of that, it really does not hold up. Not like, we talked, the last TV show we watched was Columbo, and that show was amazing. And I really would watch all of it. Right. Because it holds up. It completely. Now, there are little things, the newspaper, the telephone, the little nostalgic pieces, of things we don't have as much now. But, this, I can't watch another episode of that. I barely got through the 2 that we had to watch.
So I'm going to give it a 5.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm doing that is because I feel that there was about as many good as bad things about it.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to go, I'm around the same. I was like 4 or 5 on it. So I think I would give it a 4. Just the slowness just bothered me. So.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. 4.5 Hulk fists out of 10.
Yikes.
That's a little lower than I thought.
Got the same rating as the candy.
Yeah, but the candy was much better.
Listen, I hope that you guys aren't disappointed with that, because you did vote for it.
Well,
but I think that the lore of the Hulk and the concept of the Hulk and the character are a lot different than this is what happens a lot of times, right? We remember things nostalgically in our brains, then we go to actually watch the show or the movie and we're like, oh.
We're like, oh, this did kind of ruin my childhood a little
bit this week. So, coming up, we do have What Is Steve Willing to Watch in a moment, but I just kind of want to preview for you guys what we're doing. So, we have a bonus that for St. Patrick's Day. So we have that coming up, and then we kind of had a lot of mystery February kind of thing, and we thought, what if we kind of themed it again for March? We're not going to do that every month, but we just thought it'd be kind of fun. There's been some fantasy stuff that we wanted to look at. So our first thing is the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon.
Yes.
Then we're going to watch for our TV show, Xena Warrior Princess.
Yes.
And then your choice for the movie was Lady Hawk.
Oh, Lady Hawk. Yes, one of my favorites, and I think one of the more underestimated movies, if it's as good as I remember it being when I was a child. And
then for our viewers' choice, we are going to have, and I'm going to post it actually tomorrow for when we're recording this. So yes. It'll have been up for a while. But we're going to have a poll for you guys, and we're going to have voting again. And this is for a Don Bluth movie animated, because we've done Disney stuff, but we haven't done non-Disney animated.
Right.
So that's what we're going to look at. So I think we have our choice of like American Tail, Land Before Time, those. Like, if you can only keep one, which one would you keep?
Yeah, there's going to be 4 or 5 that you get to choose from.
Yeah.
But you got to choose one.
And then March is, so that'll be actually for April, but March is 5 weeks. So since I have not really watched the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon or Xena Warrior Princess, and I've never seen Lady Hawk, the 5th week is Megan's choice.
Okay.
But I will, and I'm not going to do it now, but we will have a very special What Is Steve Willing to Watch when we get to that point.
Okay, so I have that to dread and look forward
Yeah,
to.
it's all stuff that I was obsessed with as a kid or a teenager.
Boy.
And also, whatever category you don't pick, we're going to do in June, which also has 5 weeks.
Okay.
So that's what's coming up. Torture for Steve and possibly torture for Megan, though I doubt as much as this week because this was a real stinker.
Wow.
All right, so what is Steve willing to watch? So there are 28 episodes of the D&D cartoon.
Yes.
All on YouTube, but I don't think anywhere else so much as I can find them.
Okay.
I think that they are all available on YouTube. Like if I clicked into the separate episodes, I think they would play. So because it's Dungeons and Dragons, my thought was I would like to watch the pilot episode to see the establishment of the characters.
Yep.
Would you like to take a roll of the dice? I have a 20 and 2 4s.
I think we have to roll the dice, right? It's
because
D&D.
it's Dungeons and Dragons.
Roll the dice.
All right. Your number is 15.
15.
Okay, so the pilot episode... Hang on a second. The pilot episode is called The Night of No Tomorrow.
Okay.
And your episode is episode 15. I think there was just one season of this, right? Looks like it. 15 is called The Treasure of Tardos. And it looks like it opens at a carnival.
Okay.
Or an amusement park. So that should be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. And the dice decided.
The dice made the choice, just like in regular Dungeons and Dragons.
So really, this segment should have been called, What Do the Dice Want to Watch?
I guess. What are the dice willing to watch?
There you go.
I need different music for it. All right. So, yeah, that's what's coming up. And we just want to say thank you again for everybody participating. We're super excited to have those interactions with you. If you haven't yet, please leave a like, leave a review. And we look forward to hearing from you guys.
Check out our Patreon.
Check out that Patreon page, and our links to listen and the Patreon links are on our website, stopruiningmychildhood.com. Thanks, everybody.